Elfreth's Alley on 2nd Street north of Arch is literally an 18th century street, not merely because of the stone cobbling, but because its houses are not restorations. They have been in continuous use as residences since colonial times.
Hello and welcome to Virtual Fete Day. My name is Ted Moss and I'm the Associate Director here at the Elfreth's Alley Association. I'm inside house number 126 Elfreth's Alley, which since the 1960s has been our museum. But our organization actually was founded decades earlier in the 1930s. In 1934, we held our first open house day. That event has evolved to become what we now know as Fete Day. And in the time since 1934, we've only canceled it, I believe, a few times. One was in 1975, the street was getting resurfaced. And then this year we've had to cancel it because of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're hoping that this virtual Fete Day captures some of the spirit of sort of our normal event, the event that you know and love, but I also think it's going to offer some things that you couldn't get on a normal Fete Day. For one, we have some behind-the-scenes tours that are going to show you spaces that we can't just send hundreds of people into, but also we've had to think a little outside the box, and we've reached out to some friends of ours, and we have some cool programming coming up for you that wouldn't normally be part of Fete Day, but I think it's going to be a good time. We have, like I said, we have some tours, we have some how-to demonstrations, we have some first-person interpreters who will be talking to you about from the past, essentially, and we have some music as well. So it's going to be informative. I also hope that it's fun. Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us. One more thing, Fete Day has always been a fundraiser, along with Deck the Alley, our Christmas celebration. These two events are our biggest sources of income for the year, and they're what allow us to keep doing work like running this museum, sharing the stories of Elfreth's Alley, and advocating for preservation here and elsewhere in our city. If you support that mission and you're able to give today, please do. You can do that at elfrethsalley.org/donate. If you can't donate today, that's okay. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you in the real world at some point. But for now, enjoy Virtual Fete Day. You'll see me again, but for now, enjoy the show.
My name is Meredith Laboon, and I'm a historical costumer based right here in Philadelphia. And to celebrate Fete Day at Elfreth's Alley, I thought I might show you one example of what a person who lived on Elfreth's Alley might be wearing in the late 18th century. At that time, Elfreth's Alley was filled with a lot of working class and artisan families, so I thought I'd show you an example of what an artisan who lived on Elfreth's Alley in the late 18th century might wear every day. So I've started out with just underpinnings, and you can see even though I'm in undress, I'm wearing quite a lot by modern standards. I already have on a cap to cover my hair, along with a shift, which is the base garment, an under petticoat, which is this quilted skirt, stays, and my shoes and stockings. So now that I have these foundations on, it's time to start putting on the rest of my clothing for the day. You'll notice I'm not wearing any skirt supports. There were skirt supports such as pocket hoops and false rumps that were fashionable at the time, but for an artisan, it would be pretty tricky to wear those things while going through your work throughout the day, so I've chosen not to wear one for this ensemble. So the next thing to add will be a petticoat, which just goes on right over the head and ties at front and back like an apron. And this is made out of a brown striped linen. The fabrics available at the time would have been linen, cotton, wool, and silk. And linen and wool would be the most affordable fabrics. So for a nice summer day like Fete Day, it's best to be wearing mostly linen. I'm just tying this at the back. And next I will add a kerchief to my outfit. This is also sometimes called a handkerchief or a neckerchief. And this is worn both for fashion and modesty. They come in a lot of fun prints and colors at the time. So I'm just going to add that right around the shoulders. It can also be tied in a number of different ways as well. And next I'll add a jacket or a short gown over top. Again, we see linen coming into play with this blue check linen, which would be worn with a busier print like on my kerchief. People in the 18th century did a lot more pattern matching and mixing different fabrics than we often think today. And you'll notice this gown is actually just getting pinned together at the front. This was really common for closures on women's clothing in the 18th century, since buttons were very expensive and were mostly just used on menswear or menswear inspired clothing such as a riding habit. So I'm just pinning this closed at the front. And I just need one more accessory to complete this outfit, and that would be my apron. Aprons obviously help keep your clothing clean, which helps it stay nice for longer, but it's also just considered to be very fashionable in the 18th century to have an apron over your outfit. And this just ties right at the front. You might also have another accessory like a chatelaine hanging from your apron strings. And that's it for getting dressed for a working class person in the 18th century. If you'd like to learn more about historical costuming, you can find me at www.meredithlaboon.com, or you can also find me on Instagram at mlaboon. That's MLABOON. Happy Fete Day, Alfred's Alley, and thanks so much for having me.
Hello, my name is Emily Taggart-Stricker, and I sit on the Elfreth's Alley Board of Directors. I'm a historic preservationist, and I specialize in building materials. I've learned to read the materials on a historic structure to find out the whole story of its history, as well as the people that live there. Through all the projects that I've worked on, and during my time studying historic preservation at the University of Mary Washington in Fredericksburg, Virginia, I've learned to utilize all the tools and resources that I have available to me: deeds, tax records, maps, newspapers, as well as the materials on the building itself. Luckily, at the Elfreth's Alley Museum, we have some amazing collections of research that has been completed in the past. I've been spending a lot of time reading through Hannah Roach's research about Elfreth's Alley. She did an absolutely amazing amount of work researching the deed history of every property on the alley. She has also combed historic documents and newspapers to learn more about the people that lived on the alley. There's some exciting stories about ship captains in the 18th century that I look forward to sharing in the future. But today, I'm going to talk about number 135 here on the alley, using her documents and other items found in the Elfreth's Alley archives. Historically numbered 15, it stands out to many visitors because of the large glass window. It's unique among a collection of what are considered standard-sized windows on the alley. As visitors walk past these homes, they see panes of glass of varying sizes in the windows, all significant in their own way. But the large arched window at 135 is almost 17 feet tall and 8 feet wide. Very large for its current surroundings, but this was not always the case, and upon closer inspection, we can use the historic brick arch as a clue to its history. The alley and the land on both sides was originally part of two lots, one owned by John Gilbert and the other by Arthur Wells, at the beginning of the 1700s. In 1704, Richard Warder purchased the lot where 135 stands, as well as the now open garden at 133, and part of 137, in addition to a lot on 2nd Street. It then passed through multiple hands until Benjamin Vining sold it to Jeremiah Elfreth in 1716 for £20. Jeremiah was a blacksmith by trade and had just married his first wife, Sarah Oldman. The Elfreth connections to the alley and its early property owners are many. Jeremiah Elfreth Sr. owned this land, now minus the current 133 lot, until his death in 1772, when it was divided and given to his daughter Elizabeth. It then passed to other owners that were all in some way related to the Elfrith family by marriage over the next 20 years. It appears that this land where 135 stands remained vacant and unbuilt on during this time. Finally, in 1791, 46 feet of this lot was reunited with the 2nd Street property under the ownership of Jeremiah Elfrith III and his brother Josiah. When Josiah signed over his half share of the land to the younger Jeremiah, he retained the right to travel down what was then an 8-foot alley to his land that fronted on 2nd Street. This 1875 Philadelphia Atlas image still acknowledges the small alley or cart path. Specifically, Josiah asked that the alley be for, quote, the use of wagons, carriages, horses, and footmen, end quote. Jeremiah was allowed to build under and over the alley as long as 12 feet of headroom was left open. Some research shows a frame structure being built here in 1796, when Jeremiah III owned the property. Both renters that are documented as residing here were Turners, possibly one that produced furniture for Stephen Girard. We do know that in 1805, Jeremiah sold this property, and at some point near that time, the brick dwelling we see today was built. Initially, Josiah's wishes were honored and an alley was located here. Here is a 1935 image of 135 Elfrith's Alley that shows earlier doors located at the opening and an even larger entrance next door. And in 1962, during the annual Fête celebration, we see that visitors could at least peek inside, if not walk in. But today, a large window allows the residents of 135 to use the area once reserved for horses and carts as a livable interior space. In 1989, University of Penn students did a survey of the street, and their documentation proposes the arch was at one point altered due to the break in the brick belt course. Here, higher on the building, we see it stays consistent. Some people that come down the alley find the large window startling. Others don't even notice it. If you stand back and look at it, I think it's very striking due to the height and curve of the arch. People might first mistake it for a previous entrance to a carriage house or garage, but as we have learned from Josiah's wishes, that is not the case at all.
Welcome to the 2020 virtual open house tour of Elfrith Alley. Hopefully this will encourage you to come to a real open house tour in the future. Our house, number 129, was built in 1797, the year that John Adams became president. It has a full-height basement, which is accessed by the hatch cover, then 3 floors of living space, and then a slope ceiling attic at the very top. Its original occupant was the sea cabin. This was back in the days when Elfrith Alley was a lot closer to the river than it is now.
Hello everyone, welcome to 129 Elfrith Alley. We have lived here for 45 years. We're only going to stay for 2, and we love Philadelphia, and we've been fixing up the house. It's taken us a while to get it the way we like it. Philadelphia is a really wonderful place, so many different cultures and so forth. But this alley, the uniqueness of the alley is that it's the only toll street in America that has colonial homes that are lived in. There are just a few houses that might be early 1800s, but it's unique in that the entire street is a colonial, authentic colonial. And that's why we want to save it for the next generations.
Our house is number 129. It was built at the same time number 131 next door was. It was built by the same people. And it has sort of the common alleyway, cartway, to get to the backyard so you don't have to go through the house. Let's go. Once you get past the front of the house, the rooms get narrower, which allows for side windows and room for light and air. The back of the house has only 2 stories with no attic or basement. Number 129, like most of the houses on the alley, have a small rear yard, just big enough for a couple of flowers and eating outdoors during the spring and the fall. But not so big that you need a snowblower. In colonial times, the garden would have been used to grow fruit and vegetables. We can buy those at the store, so we bought flowers for our garden. While putting in the flower garden, we found a variety of pottery from early times, which we decided to keep. We also found a couple old bottles above the attic. Let's go inside now.
Hi, I care about Elfreth's Alley Museum because I love history and it's important to preserve the stories that are not so well known. Please donate to the address below.
Hello again. I'm in the basement of house number 126, and I wanted to show you this little staircase to nowhere. It just ends in a ceiling, basically. This staircase was originally put in when the house was expanded around about the 1850s, and the front staircase that had previously existed was torn out at that time. So this was the only way to get from the first floor down to the cellar and get back up again. Now in the 1960s, when this house became a museum, the architects had to make lots of decisions about what to restore, what to highlight, what to get rid of. And one of the things they chose to highlight was that earlier staircase in the front room. So they actually rebuilt that entire staircase. And it made this one, which was further back in the house, essentially obsolete. We use the upper reaches of this stair, but not this little stretch. Now, one thing that I found interesting, just checking it out today, is it looks like these bottom few stairs are newer. So I think that these were probably put in, you can see a different color between this stair and this stair. I think these were probably put in during the period when this was becoming a museum, but maybe before it was fully finished. Maybe it was just useful to be able to come down here. In the end, the architects decided at some point to either not finish the staircase or shut it off, and instead, if right above where this stair would come out is now a closet, and it's a very well-used closet. So perhaps they made the right call. But every restoration process brings lots of choices. This was the result of a couple different choices. So I just wanted to show you that. Thanks for joining me.
The City of Philadelphia has regulations concerning the outside of the houses, but the inside of the houses are strictly up to the owners. So you'll find on a real tour of Elfreth's Alley, each one is very unique. Reflects 300 years, different owners, different technologies and society and economic changes. The owners of this house probably couldn't afford to get rid of the evidence of gas lights when they were popular. Every room in this house has a stub where there once was a gas light, in that very brief history in time between candles and electricity. This house is fortunate in that it has the original mantelpiece over the first floor fireplace. The mantels on the second floor had to be replaced. Each of the 3 working fireplaces has a candle closet on the side, where in colonial days you stored things you wanted to keep warm during the winter. When they first installed the radiant heater system, they put the heater in the basement and ran the exhaust up through the chimneys. When we bought the house, we spent the effort to move the exhaust into the candle closets and made the fireplaces workable again.
And we use this as our living room. We gather here. Sometimes we've had 45 people in this room. I know it's hard to believe. Sitting on stools, sitting on the floor. So we were glad to be able to sing and talk in front of the fireplace. The other thing that we have in this room that's kind of neat is these Windsor chairs that were created by a gentleman who used to make them on the alley during our fete days. And this is a birthday present for me. And it has no nails in it, so it's very unique in that way. And also, they're small, because in this house, the rooms are small, and you don't want to have oversized furniture.
On this long wall, we decided to put up a reproduction of the 1753 lithograph called Perspective of Philadelphia. It's supposed to be taken from the New Jersey side, looking at the city. It was done as a real estate brochure to try to attract new residents to the colony. The tall structure in the middle is Christ Church steeple, which was the tallest building in North America for 85 years. On this map, Elfreth's Alley would have been behind this building, which was on the waterfront. Let's go see the dining room. In the colonial days, this would have been a combination of the kitchen, the dining room, the family room, all rolled into one. This would have been the spiral staircase which led to the sleeping quarters upstairs. In a typical fete day, we have colonial craftsmen on the alley. Back in 1979, there was a blacksmith that was making chandeliers on the alley. We purchased this one from him.
As you can see, we are candle people. We have candlesticks of all different types and shapes in the house. And every night for dinner, we have candles on the table, whether we're having a bigger meal or hot dogs. It's just important for us to be grateful for the food that we have, and that's one of the ways of honoring it for us. Also, we've had 12, 14 people at this table, which is, again, very important for us to share our meals with people. Over here, I want you to take a look at this cabinet, because this was original to the house, and it used to be in the room we were going to see in a second, the kitchen, and I'll tell you the story of how it got in here. Oh, by the way, I'm wondering if you could hear all those creaky floors as we were walking towards the kitchen. That is so unique to these houses, and of course we love it. You'd have to love it. So now we're in the kitchen, and of course that's a very important room in everyone's house. And remember that cabinet we just talked about that was in the dining area? That was actually originally put in this corner of the room because refrigeration had not been invented yet. So when refrigeration was invented, they had to put the refrigerator in front of the windows. We also had no cabinets or any of this modern stuff. We had an old stove that we got it to work okay. You didn't know how hot it was at certain points, whether it was 350 or 450. But we made do, and it actually was fine. But one day the oven door fell off in my hand, and we said, I think that's going to be the next project. So we had a very good carpenter, young man came in, and he made wonderful, very simple cabinets. And he took that other cabinet apart and put it into the dining room. And then we were able to take the refrigerator and move it away from the windows, which is really key. We wanted to have a light.
So we had a chance to tell you a little bit about 129 Elfreth's Alley, but there's certainly a lot more we could tell you. You should come to one of our open houses. They're twice a year. In the first Saturday in June, it's Fete Day, and the first Saturday in December, it's called Deck the Alley, sort of Christmas decorations.
We'd love to see you. Please come on to 129 and the entire street. It'd be great to see you.
Be well.
Be well.
Oh, Hello. Excuse me a minute while I get my yarn off to the side. Now that it is safe to talk about certain things, now that we're an established, sovereign new nation, the United States of America, I can talk about some things from my past that were most exciting and helpful to the cause of winning the revolution. Did you know that George Washington had some really important tools in his arsenal? Not exactly metal tools, no, people that helped him win the revolution. Spies. Yes, spies. In fact, in a letter written after the surrender at Yorktown, the British intelligence minister wrote to the King of England and said that George Washington primarily won the revolution because he outspied the British. Yes, it's true. And most everyone has heard of the famed Culper Group from Long Island, New York. But oh, George Washington, he was smart. He used local patriots wherever the army was throughout the revolution to get him information, that they would overhear things that the British were talking about, and he would be able to get ahead of them, ahead of their intentions oftentimes because of these brave local nameless patriots. Well, I'm here to talk to you about some of the things that happened during the occupation of Philadelphia City from the end of September of 1777 through mid-June of 1778. And why is this important to me? Because, well, I was one of those spies. Oh, really? You say? How could I be one of those spies? An old woman with her yarn and... Well, I was. And I wasn't the only one. Women were pretty important to the cause. Now, the Culper Ring had two that we know of that were women, but we don't know what their names were. It was Agent 355 and X. But they were so good that they were only mentioned by those names or code words. And they were mentioned just a couple of times in sentences and letters to Washington and others that were in the spy ring, but they never got caught. But they were so important. Well, I was one of those during the Philadelphia era. Yes, 1777 into 1778. Oh, I'm sorry. I should introduce myself. Forgive me. Oh, the blunder. I am Ma Rinker, or that's what the locals fondly call me here in Germantown, Pennsylvania. My family owns the Buck Tavern here in Germantown. And so, of course, during the Philadelphia occupation, the British officers were always coming into the tavern to drink and eat and have their meetings. Well, I was attending to them, and while I was attending to their needs, I would hear some things that were very important to Washington and his cause while they were in the greater Philadelphia area. And how would I get those messages to Washington? Well, that's easy. By knitting. Knitting, you say? Well, how could that be a spy technique or get messages to Washington? Well, I'll tell you. I was well known for my prowess at knitting, and I was well known to sit atop a favorite rock overlooking the Wissahickon Valley, and I would often be seen there stretching out my flax yarn to bleach in the sun. And while I would sit there waiting for my yarn to bleach, enjoying the sunshine, I would knit and knit and knit and knit. Well, when I heard important information that needed to get to Washington's army, I would go sit on top of that rock and knit, and nothing out of the ordinary, right? But all of a sudden, I'd let one of my balls of yarn just fall off the cliff down into the valley below. And the best part is in conjunction with me was a group of local militia men called the Green Boys. And they would be watching me. And when they saw my ball of yarn fall off the top of that rock down into the Wissahickon Valley, they would be on the opposite hillside watching all of this. They would go down into that valley, get the ball of yarn when nobody else was looking, and unravel the yarn and get the message right out of it. Send it all the way off to Washington and his army. Pretty ingenious, yes? And the best part is those British officers had no idea that this old woman was getting their information and sending it off to Washington. It's the best. Nobody ever suspected. So that's how I got away with it and be able to sit here and tell you the tale. Oh, and I wasn't the only one during that era. There was tale of a woman, a Quaker, an old Quaker woman in Philadelphia City, downtown. The officers, British officers, were always quartering in people's houses. And they were quartering in her house and would often have meetings there. And she was known to, she was hiding, they say. She hid in a closet while they were having an important meeting, and they were planning to bushwhack Washington and his army when they were in the area of White Marsh. Oh, and she found a reason to get out the next day and go, I think they said to go buy flour or some such. And she made her way to one of Washington's couriers and gave the information so that when the British showed up at White Marsh to ambush the Americans, surprise attack, surprise, surprise, because Washington was ready for them and there was just a standoff. So these are just a few of the ways that spies and women like myself were important to winning the revolution. So the next time that you think of the wondrousness of America and our independence from England and the greatness of our country, don't forget to thank spies, nameless people like Ma Rinker here, Lydia Darrah's Agent 355X, amongst others throughout the 8-year revolution that helped Washington outspy the British and win us our independence from England. Huzzah!
One of the most special things about Elfreth's Alley is that nearly all of these historic buildings are still active homes. The residents of the street figure out how to balance history with comfort in these houses, but they're not alone. Since the 1966 Historic Preservation Act, rehabilitation of historic buildings for all sorts of purposes has been on the rise, and in the past few years, the process of rehabilitating historic homes for personal use has found an engaged audience on Instagram. These old house accounts bring viewers inside the work done to make a historic house livable and beautiful. The folks doing these DIY renovations also have some pretty nuanced preservation ethics that guide their work, and so we invited several of these accounts to contribute short videos sharing their homes and processes with you all.
My name is Victoria, and my husband Zane and I live in this 1900 farmhouse in a small farming town of Western PA. Our house may not be historic in the definition of notable events from the past, but a house doesn't have to be on the National Registry to be worth saving. Every old home has a story to tell and a history of its own. When we started our renovations a year ago, our goal was to keep and emphasize all of the character that had been built into this place 120 years ago. It is a farmhouse. This land was in the same family as an operational farm for 4 generations. So it's not super fancy, it was lived in, but it has a lot of unique things that are very special to us. We're probably a couple months away from being finished with the first floor of our house, but I'll show you a couple of the projects that we're working on and some of the things that we've already accomplished. While Zane was working on the structural renovations of the house, my one job was the staircase. We joked that he would have the whole house finished around me before I was done with it, and that turned out to be true. The previous owners had painted it burgundy in 2001. But for 100 years before that, it had never been painted. Like I said before, the house isn't very fancy, but if they chose to splurge on one item, I think they chose correctly. It may seem crazy, and I have no idea how many hours I spent on it, but this staircase wasn't something we could just paint over again. I know it looks far from done, but I'm hoping within the next month to be able to finish sanding, staining, and sealing this beautiful staircase. One of the things we did accomplish is rewiring the original light fixtures from our house. All in all, this probably cost us about $10 and a half hours worth of time, but the detail in this light is prettier than anything I've seen in any store. We're hoping to hang these up very soon, and they add the perfect amount of original character back into the house. There are a few things in our kitchen that I think make it really special. One is the beadboard ceiling. At some point, they had put a latex paint over an oil paint, and that made the whole thing peel. So we spent a lot of hours scraping down the loose paint and then re-priming and sealing it with a top coat of paint. In my opinion, a beadboard ceiling makes a kitchen really special. The next things I love about our kitchen are these 2 cabinets. The one on the right is a Hoosier cabinet that had been left in our attic here, and I can only imagine that it would have been original to the farmhouse. The one on the left is the original built-in pantry. I love being able to incorporate these 2 original pieces back into the kitchen. These old-time cabinets have more storage than any modern ones I've ever seen. Just like the kitchen and the lights, we plan on using as many original items as we have in this house. This phonograph was left in the attic, and we believe is original to the house. And although it's missing most of the inside pieces, it's still a beautiful addition to display, and to think about how many years of entertainment was played through this in this home. And the best idea they had when building this house was to put the bay window overlooking the barn and all of their fields. So that's just a little glimpse into our home and a few of the ways that we are trying to keep its history alive.
We'll be back with some more DIY renovators in just a moment.
Imagine walking down Elfreth's Alley and seeing the faded brick of the row homes, but the sign reads Cherry Street instead. That's how people walk down the street we today call Elfreth's Alley between 1890 and 1940. As late as 1937, the Philadelphia Evening Bulletin explained to readers that Elfreth's Alley, in case you are not familiar with very old Philadelphia, is now Cherry Street, between 2nd and Front Streets. Calling Elfreth's Alley part of Cherry Street may not seem right today, but it's really fitting that the alley was once called Cherry Street because the hair trees were so important to many residents of the alley. I'm Joe Makeup of the Elfreth's Alley Museum, and I'm here to talk about this black cherry tree. The tree is also known by the Latin name Prunus serotina. On the outside, black cherry bark is scaly and coarse, but it's what's inside that counted for Elfreth's Alley. The tree has been popular for woodworkers in the region since the Lenape people first stewarded this land thousands of years ago. This includes many of the woodworkers on Elfreth's Alley, including a Josiah Elfreth. Consider Ephraim Haynes and Daniel Trotter, 2 cabinet makers and lumberyard managers who worked at 11 Elfreth's Alley in the 1790s. Loggers in New Jersey and Pennsylvania would cut down cherry trees at least this size and sail the logs down the Delaware River in log rafts, which Philadelphia sawmill owners cut into lumber for sale to people like Haynes and Trotter. Haynes and Trotter then shaped the cherry lumber into furniture. They used the wood so much that by Trotter's death in 1800, the pair owned 2,006 feet of cherry boards. As shown by this close-up on some cherry furniture, black cherry wood has a smooth grain and lovely reddish color, and it's also fairly sturdy. All these qualities made black cherry popular as a decorative wood for people like Haynes and Trotter. Trotter's woodworking with black cherry helped make the alley we see today. Trotter built and owned many of the houses on the street, and he was a cousin of fellow woodworker Josiah Elfreth. As far as these woodworkers relied on cherry wood, the alley was Cherry Street long before 1890. It's also fitting that Elfreth's Alley was named Cherry Street in 1890 because the trees these workers had used were running out. A Philadelphia sawmill operator noted in 1821 that the log rafts that had carried black cherry and other wood to the wharves above Vine Street have decreased. The timber in most places is cut away. Because black cherry can take as many as 17 years to reach this size, continuous fast-paced logging removed cherry and other trees from the landscape. The Pennsylvania State Board of Agriculture calculated that this deforestation cut forests from over 90% of Pennsylvania's landmass to just 36% by 1895. As the board concluded, this deforestation threatened the timber supply woodworkers on Elfreth's Alley needed, as well as the health of the Delaware River they relied on for logs. Their creation of Fairmount Park in 1855 and the Michaud Forestry Lectures from the American Philosophical Society, running from 1877 through 1892, are two ways ordinary Philadelphians engaged with reforestation efforts that supported trees like the black cherry. Here are some young black cherry trees growing anew in an area that had been cleared. Thanks in part to Philadelphians like those on the alley, Pennsylvania is today 58% forest, including many black cherries once more. Next time you use a wooden object, think about the tree and the workers that brought you this object. Today we rely on trees like the black cherry for furniture, healthy waterways, and so much more. We rely on those workers who build and maintain wooden materials. Consider helping the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society or other organizations near you that protect trees. We could all learn from when Elfreth's Alley was Cherry Street. History is a group effort. I thank my quarantine partner Nadia Maycook, shown here, for the camera work and editing.
Loud are the bells of Norwich, and the people come and go.
Here by the Tower of Julian I tell them what I know. Ring out the bells of Norwich and let the winter come and go. All shall be well again, I know. Love like the yellow daffodil is coming through the snow. Love like the yellow daffodil is Lord of all I know. Ring out bells of Norwich and let the winter come and go. All all shall be well again, I know. Ring for the yellow daffodil, the flower in the snow. Ring for the yellow daffodil and tell them what I know. Ring out, bells of Norwich, and let the winter come and go. All shall be well again, I know. All shall be well, I am telling you. Let the winter come and go. All shall be well again, I know.
Hello. Elfreth's Alley is important to me because it gives insight into what makes Philadelphia unique, its people and its communities. Please consider donating to Elfreth's Alley. We need your support. Thank you.
Welcome to the second floor of House 126. We have this room set up to look as it might have when Mary and Louis Kolb lived here in the mid-19th century. Louis Kolb was a shoemaker or a cordwainer, and in the time that the Kolbs lived here, they had 8 children and 2 apprentices. So the small house that they had bought was not going to cut it, basically. During their time in the house, the Kolbs significantly expanded the house out the back, basically doubling the square footage with that expansion. But they also owned house number 124, which is right behind me here, and eventually expanded that one too. We don't know exactly the order of operations. We don't know whether they lived in this home, expanded it, then bought the house next door as a rental property, but there is some evidence that suggests that they probably lived in both 126 and 124 at the same time. That evidence primarily is a fire insurance report from 1865. A fire insurance inspector came through the house and noted that there was essentially an undocumented door in this room that connected the 2 homes. Whether the Kolbs were penalized for that sort of off-the-record door or not is not entirely clear, but it does seem that at one point there was a door from this room into the second floor of 124. I wanted to highlight that because it's something that we can't see anymore. There's probably still physical evidence of a door in the wall. I don't personally know where it is, but it's something that sort of can live on in our imaginations, even though we can't see it as well. Okay, on to the next clip.
Hello, it's Jessica Rhodes from Park and Division, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about what historic preservation means to me. For those of you who don't know, we bought our house, Danascara Place, in July 2019, so we haven't quite lived here a year yet. And during the process of buying the house, which took 8 months, we filled out an application to have the house listed on the National Historic Registry. And it was actually listed in September of 2019. So I'll tell you a little bit about the history of the house in case you don't know. Danascara Place was built in 1795 to replace a house that was on the same property just a little bit in front of the current house that had been burned down in the 1780 Mohawk Valley raids in the Revolutionary War. And the house was owned by the original family that bought the land patent in the early 1700s from then until the 1940s. Then it was sold, and in the 1950s it was turned into apartments, and at that point a lot of the original details were taken out of the house, or some of them, although many are still left. And then in the 1970s, a man who was very interested in historic preservation bought the house, and he preserved any of the original details that were left in the house, but he did do a gut renovation to update the electrical and the structure. He put steel beams throughout and concrete piers in the basement, and just really made sure that the house would last for many more years. He also added a large addition out in the back, and then the house passed on to new owners in the 1990s, and it passed through a few owners, and nothing was really updated architecturally during those years. Then in 2011, the addition on the back burned, and the original house was not affected by that fire, but the house was abandoned after that, and it was abandoned for 8 years before we bought it in July of last year. So our approach to historic preservation in this house, the first thing that we care about is preserving any of the original features that are left. There are wood windows throughout this house with the wavy glass. They have been here since the 1870s, and we really care about renovating those completely so that they are more airtight and the wood will not rot, and they'll last for many more years. In the meantime, we're using interior storm windows to make sure that there are no drafts coming in and the house is still energy efficient while we wait to be able to restore those windows. There are other elements like the woodwork. There are damaged pieces of the original woodwork. There are rotting porch railings that we want to restore and replace in the event that they can't be saved, and we will replace them in kind to look exactly like the originals in that case. So when preserving the original features, we just want to make sure that we keep them exactly the same, and if we have to replace them, they still look the same. In terms of adding anything that isn't here at the moment, we are trying to make sure that anything we add architecturally to this house is sympathetic to the style of the house and the formality of the house, and where possible, also the time period when it was built. So that's where I think historic preservation gets tricky, because unless you are creating a museum, you can't always have the modern conveniences that you want and still have it be sympathetic to the year it was built. And I feel like my approach is usually trying to have historic nods in a modern space like that needs to be modern and needs to have those conveniences, but not necessarily trying to copy any specific time period.
So when we bought the house, this bathroom, which is the only room that we have almost finished renovating, was completely falling apart. It was a 1980s style bathroom, nothing worth saving besides the architectural elements that were here. So we had to completely take it out and start over, and the most important thing to me when I was renovating this bathroom, which I was renovating while I was kind of learning about what I wanted my approach to historic preservation to even be, was that I preserved the architectural elements that were already here. The floor that was here was, like I said, put in the 1980s. It wasn't worth saving. I chose this floor tile. It's not what would have been here in the 1870s because there wouldn't have been a bathroom here. It's not even what would have been here in the 1920s, but it is a classic pattern that has been around for centuries, and I thought that it fit the style of the house, the formality of the house, and that's why I chose that. The only thing that is in this bathroom that is strictly what may have been in a historic bathroom is the clawfoot tub. And that's also something that I love and that I think is functional because we have 2 little boys, so that fit perfectly in this bathroom. Like I said, the most important thing was that I preserved the architectural elements and really highlighted them. But the second most important thing was that it was functional. So while a lot of the choices may not be strictly historic, I feel that they fit the formality of the house and they also show off our own individual style.
So that bathroom is just an example of how we, in some cases, might just be making nods to history in a space that we're renovating, especially a space like a bathroom or a kitchen that needs to be a little bit more modern. But at the same time, we're not making strictly historic choices in the finishes. But that won't be the case everywhere, because I think that our approach to preservation has different tiers depending on what we're talking about. So I'll show you another example where we would make sure that it looks like it could be original.
These three openings, this one here between the dining room and the foyer, the one between the foyer and the living room, and the one between the dining room and the back hallway, these are something that we want to change in the house, and this would be a major architectural change, and we want to make sure that whatever we choose would look like it was original to the house. These spaces are where steel structural beams were added in the 1980s renovation. And I think that the choice to leave these openings so wide and without casements was a choice of modern convenience for an open floor plan, which that was kind of the start of that super popularity of the open floor plan. But I don't think that it really fits with the style of the house, and for the way that we live, I also don't think that it feels functional to just have the whole house open like this. So when we do rework these openings, we've been doing a lot of research to decide how we're going to do that. We have looked at Italianate homes that were built around the same period and kind of paid attention to how the rooms were separated. A lot of them just had a doorway. Some of them had an arch doorway because arches were so popular in the style. Some of them had a larger arch opening. A lot of them had pocket doors. So that's kind of something that we are doing a lot of research on to try to decide what would look best here, what would work best for us, but most importantly, what would look like it was original to the house.
So to summarize, I think that when we're trying to preserve this house, the main thing I think is that you just want it to be strong and have quality materials that are going to last for another 100, 200 years, because you want the house to last. That's what preservation is about. To me, that's the root of it. The second tier of that is we want to make sure that all the original details that are here stay here and are well taken care of and will continue to last for years. And number three, any decisions that we make to change anything, if it's a architectural element that isn't easily changed, I want that to be something that looks like it could have originally been in the house, like moldings that might be on the walls, or if we were to replace any of the porch railings, I want that to look like it belongs here and like it was original.
Hi, my name is Leanne, and my husband Justin and I have lived in this circa 1894 Queen Anne Victorian right outside of Pittsburgh for about a year and a half. So this was just one of the most recent projects that we finished. This room used to be a baby pink wall. So we painted, I stained the picture railing, and then our handyman Bill helped us cut the pieces and hang. And this is George and Amanda. They were the second owners of this home, and they kept it in their family for almost 40 years. So this is kind of my way of preserving their memory and keeping them present in the home. So here's a look at our most recent project. So I'll give you a quick tour of the most finished room in the house. It's the parlor. It has these amazing pocket doors. these paintings, I actually got in touch with the great-great-granddaughter of the second owners of our home, and their daughter who lived here was an artist, and she painted these. So I made copies of the prints and I framed them. So these prints are from around, she painted these pictures in around 1909 and I think 1911. So that's special. That's one way I like to honor the previous owners and people who lived here. And these original shutters in here are awesome. There's Harper down there. There's the parlor.
Personally, preservation has been more of a mindset more than anything. It's been learning and understanding that this home and the history and the architectural significance of this home in the world, and it's bigger than me. It's much bigger than me. It's been here before I was even a thought, and it will continue to hopefully be here well after I'm gone. So everything that I do in this house, I take into consideration the people that have come before me that have lived here, and I take into consideration the people that are hopefully gonna own the house after me. I don't want to take away from the experience that future owners are gonna have. If it's in this house, that means that the people before me have taken care of it, they loved it, they cherished it, they appreciated it. Therefore, I'm gonna follow suit and I'm gonna do the same thing. A lot of the things in this home, like most of them, they're no longer manufactured. They can't be made again. So once they're gone, they're gone. And I think it's just such an important thing to honor history, to honor those who have come before you, and to understand that these homes, it's bigger than you. It is. These homes transcend time. These homes are bigger than trends. They're bigger than fads. They're bigger than what HGTV has out there. So to me, preservation is a mindset. And if you do want to get rid of something, save it. Instead of just grabbing the sledgehammer and start going to town, think, how can I save this for the future, for the people that are going to come after me? If you remove something, how can you save it? How can you label where it came from and save it in the basement? Put it in a box, preserve it for those who are going to come after you. So if they want to put it back, they know where it came from and they know what it looked like. Just simple things like that. So really, preservation is just a mindset. It really, owning this home, the experience of owning this home, and it really is bigger than me. And then also preservation, besides that, it's just taking a moment to think before you do anything. Just stop and think. Before you whip out that paint and decide to start painting that mantle, just think about everyone who cared about it and kept it original before you. And I always try to honor that. I try to respect what the previous owners have always done. You own an old home, I think it's part of our responsibility to preserve it. And if you don't want an old home, then don't buy an old home, honestly. So when you take things out that can't be replaced, sure, can it be replaced and put back? Money can buy almost anything, but money also can't buy the craftsmen and the craftsmanship that went into building this home originally. Money can't buy the old growth wood that was used to build this home. It just can't, and once it's gone, it can never be put back how it originally was built and intended to be. So that's what preservation means to me.
It's my house and I live here. 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 It's my ho live here. It's my house and I live
of house number 126. We have a lot of really interesting artifacts in this room, but one of my favorites is this sign that we keep here on the mantle. The Hearthstone was a small sandwich shop or restaurant that was operated out of house 115, beginning in the early 1930s and going through the early 1940s. The proprietor of the shop was Daliati, and when she started her business on the street, she noticed that some of the houses had been bought up by a paint company that was located around the corner, and she probably reasonably worried that they were going to be redeveloped. And she wrote to the editor of the Sunday Evening Bulletin asking for help and guidance on how to preserve this little street in Philadelphia. They ultimately put her in contact with Frances Ann Wister and the Philadelphia Society for the Preservation of Landmarks, but Daliati also formed her own organization, the Elfreth's Alley Association. So much of what we do today can be directly traced to Daliati and her associates, and so we wanted to set aside a little part of our virtual Fete Day to sort of pay tribute to that era. So we have a few things in this next block for you that are sort of jazz age kind of activities. We have a couple dances, and we sandwiched in the middle of those is a demonstration by our friends at Art in the Age for a blueberry sangria. We're going to play the recipe card here in just a moment, so if you want to gather ingredients for your sangria during the first dance number, you can do that, and then they'll show you how to make that. Okay, on with Enter the Jazz Age.
Hi everybody, this is Lee Noble from Art in the Age, mixing up a blueberry sangria today for the Elfreth's Alley fundraiser. If you didn't know, Art in the Age is located just one block away from Elfreth's Alley, and there's a rich history of cordial distilling right here in the neighborhood. Cordial distiller John Angway lived at 135 Elfreth's Alley in the 1800s. A lot of our recipes for our cordials and spirits are derived from historical preservation methods for fruits, so we see it as a natural partnership to be involved here today. I'm going to start off with 6 ounces of the Black Trumpet Blueberry Mushroom Cordial from Art in the Age in the recipe. So this is a 12-ounce bottle, so I'll just pour out half of the bottle. That looks good. Next, I'm going to put in 20 dashes of Bittercube Boulevard bitters. Got that? And then a whole bottle of white wine. This will turn out to be about 40 ounces of liquid once it's all said and done. So it makes about 10 4-ounce servings on the rocks. Okay, I have 3 ounces of lemon juice to go in here, 4 ounces of orange juice, some seltzer, give it some bubble and texture, and then I'm going to drop in ice to make sure it stays cold. Put that back in there. And then we have some lemon slices pre-cut to add some zest to the drink. Stir those in, as well as orange slices. And blueberries. All right, that's all ready to drink. You can get the Bittercube Boulevard bitters and the Black Trumpet Blueberry Cordial on our web shop at www.artandtheage.com or for curbside pickup. So thanks a lot, everybody, for having us be involved in the Elfrith Sally fundraiser. It's a pleasure to be here. Cheers.
You say either, and I say either. You say neither, and I say neither. Either, either, neither, neither. Let's call the whole thing off. You like potato, and I like patata. You like tomato, and I like tomato. Potato, patata, tomato, tomato. Let's call the whole thing off. But oh, if we call the whole thing off, then we must part. And oh, if we ever part, then that might break my heart. So if you like pajamas and I like pajamas, I'll wear pajamas and give up pajamas. For we know we need each other, so we better call the calling off. Let's call the whole thing off.
Coming soon, the Alleycast, a podcast from the Elfrith Alley Museum. Each week we feature a different story that starts on this street, but has connections across the city and around the globe. Season 1 begins June 11, and topics we will cover include dressmakers making ends meet in early Philadelphia, runaway wives, a non-binary prophet, domestic servants, factory workers, and historic preservationists. Tune in every week for a new episode via elfrethsalley.org/podcast or through Apple Podcasts. Hello again, everyone. Alas, we've reached the end of our virtual Fete Day. Thank you, especially those of you who have stuck it out to the very end. But thank you to anyone who tuned in for any part of the presentation. We're very, very grateful. Thank you also to those who contributed video, audio, or images. Could not have done this without a lot of help, and the credits are going to roll in a moment. You can see all of everyone's names. As soon as this presentation is over, this video will be available for rewatch. So if you missed the beginning or there's a part that you want to revisit, you will be able to do that on whatever platform you're currently viewing it on. If you know somebody who you think would enjoy this video, who wasn't able to tune in today, please do consider sharing this video. The more people that see it, the better. Also, if you don't already, consider following us on social media. On Facebook, you can find us at facebook.com/Elfrethsalley Museum. On Instagram and Twitter, we're at Elfrethsalley, and our website is elfrethsalley.org. If you are a fan of our work, you support what we do, and you feel like you're able to give us a donation today, or any day for that matter, you can do so at elfrethsalley.org/donate. Thank you again for tuning in. It really means the world to us. We hope we see you real soon. But for now, have a great night. Good night, everybody.